alcoholic. So I think this is maybe the 7th time I've told my story. And the first time I did it, I made a lot of notes and I totally prepared, and I never once looked at them so I have never done that again. And it comes out differently every time, and I don't always know where it's going. Generally, hopefully down the same path. So anyway, I just remember the very first time I did this, one of my really good friends said, just keep an eye on that, just remember to be sober by 7:30. And I was like, okay, if I need to be sober by 7:30 and I'm telling my story at 7, maybe I shouldn't be telling my story. Then I realized she meant while you're get to the sober part by 7:30. Okay, helpful. So my sobriety date is February 21st, 2016. I came into AA first in 2012 or 13. I had it took me 3 years to get 1 full year. So I had 3 sobriety dates, one in, I guess, 13, 14, 15, and then 16. And I'm super grateful to be able to stand here and say that I have been sober since that day. Didn't think I would say that, especially after that day. Because that is certainly, I'm familiar with the feeling of pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. But it takes what it takes, right, for each one of us, so it is what it is. So I grew up here in Dallas, the youngest of 5 children. My dad was a professor and a dean over at SMU, went to Ursuline, then went down to UT Austin. It's funny, the last time I told my story, my sister listened on Zoom, and afterwards she called and she goes, oh my God, it's like we grew up in totally different households. And I went, okay, tell me about yours. Because I said that there was a lot of chaos. Again, I'm the youngest of 5, and it's 10 years top to bottom. So by the time I'm 5 or 6 and just starting to remember things, there's a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 14-year-old, then there would have been a 10-year-old, and then me. So there was a lot of chaos. And my dad, who passed away 3 years ago, grew up in an alcoholic home in Brooklyn, New York, of which I don't, there's stories that I've just heard some from my sister past weekend, and some of it was pretty rough. And my dad didn't really talk about that. So he didn't drink, or he drank a little, but he brought with him everything that you get when you grow up in an alcoholic home. And it was a little baffling, I think, to me and maybe my siblings, because there was a lot of chaos, but there wasn't something to point a finger at, like, oh, alcohol is sort of it was just this sort of nebulous thing. There was a lot of yelling, there was a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety. My parents stayed married till he died in 59 years, but it was a little scary. There was a lot of, and my sister says, when I told my story, she said, "Oh, there was physical," because I said I grew up in a home where there was a lot of chaos but no physical violence, and she goes, "Oh, there was physical violence." So, if so, I didn't see it, or I can't remember it. Anyway, so what I learned later, that I learned during those years, was to do whatever I could to be helpful, perfect, and not add any fuel to the fire at home. My whole goal was to just not be the cause of the yelling. If I could simmer down the yelling, all the better, but I was always trying to not set it off. So it was a little bit like living in a landmine. That being said, my dad was super supportive. He coached all our sports. He drove carpool. He was really involved. But there was this kind of tension with some of the ways he handled his stress. My older siblings were, none of them are alcoholics, or at least is a parent. My mom grew up in a much quieter home, so she was not as volatile as my dad was. So I went to Christ the King. I went to to Ursuline. I started drinking probably, this is really funny, as a little aside. So I started drinking about 15, 16. And I got arrested by the Highland Park police I think it was like 2 weeks after I got my driver's license. If one of my boys did that, I would have strung them up. I'm blessed to have really good kids. I have 3 boys. So, but I just recently, I tried to come here for the Thursday night women's meeting, and there was nobody here, and so I was like, I am going to find a meeting. So I went over, there's one at, I think it's HP Presbyterian or University Park Presbyterian on McFarland or University, and it's across the street from the police department that they took me to when I got arrested at 16. So I thought that was a full story. And it's at the corner of University and Shannon. And I was like, okay, I got it. This is where you want me, at least tonight. So I try to pay attention to those little things. For me, obviously, you have to spell it out on a sign. I have other friends who are better at getting them a little more subtle. Anyway, so we drank in high school, like most, high schoolers did. But I maintained really good grades. I was in the top 10% of my class. I was an athlete. So even though I was sort of pushing the envelope a little bit, I think for my parents, I was also the 5th, so they were like, okay, whatever. But I think I pushed it pretty hard, or their tolerance for what I was playing around with. I didn't have a curfew until they gave me one in senior year because I needed one at that point. But really, I mean, it wasn't out of hand. It was pretty, I wouldn't say mild, but I was always able to do everything else I needed to do. But when I look back now, I can tell for sure that my relationship with alcohol was unique, right? Different than, not unique to us, unique to my friends, unique to kind of what else I was seeing out there. Because I generally drank to excess. And I always thought I could drink with the boys, and, I don't know why I thought that, but probably because I'm an alcoholic. So I went down to UT Austin and, drank some, and there would be windows where I wouldn't drink, and then I wouldn't be drinking very much, and then I'd be drinking more, but it didn't really feel like a problem, even though I was arrested, but that was pretty mild. I got stopped one time. I remember driving home from the hills in Austin, and when I got stopped, I remember thinking, oh shit, I should not be driving. Somehow that turned out okay, and he sent me on my way. But there was a few of those things where, I sort of was, and then I had friends who were sort of doing this, same thing, and it didn't seem that out of line. After that, I was in Austin, then I moved back up to Dallas. Eventually I got married and moved out to Southlake. And we had 3 boys who are now 22, 19, and 18. The oldest one just graduated from college last weekend. All 3 are in college. And I'm super blessed by those boys. So got married, had a baby, had another baby. My now ex-husband was traveling all the time. By the time we had the second baby, a couple of months after he was born, I didn't forewarn you that there would be tears, but there are probably going to be some tears. I don't always know where they're going to come, but this part of the story, they generally show up. So when my middle son was 2 months old, between 2 and 4 months, he was diagnosed with a very severe health condition, which is called severe hemophilia. So he doesn't stop bleeding. It's pretty rare. We didn't have it in our family, and we didn't know to what extent, how severe it was early on, and what this meant for his life. So my stress sort of kicked up a little then, and I used, one glass of wine in the evening while you're cooking dinner, becomes 2, becomes maybe 3, then you just don't even bother eating dinner. You guys kind of know how that works. There's usually one in the There, I used to keep one bottle of wine in the front cabinet and one in the kitchen, right? So my husband couldn't tell how much was going up and down. Those kind of little games, which I don't even really, looking back, I mean, I knew I was hiding it, but I don't even really think I consciously was aware that this is a bad sign. It's not good. Most people are not doing this. But he was traveling, and then we had another, maybe 2 months after we found out that this baby had severe hemophilia, I found out I was pregnant again. So kind of all the wheels fell off a little bit at that point. And the treatment for my middle son's condition was an IV 3 times a week that I had to shove a needle in his arm, and he didn't like that. So, I think that's probably when my drinking sort of started to become certainly more routine, and started to escalate a little bit. I can remember during those years, I can remember my ex-husband saying, well, I know you don't drink when I'm out of town. I was like, right, yeah, okay. Sure. I can remember my middle son, I don't know how old he was, maybe 6 or 7, reading to him at night and him saying, I think we can stop now, right, because I'm slurring my words. So I can remember some of those things, and the mom things were what got me the most. That's really what propelled me over to getting sober, or seeing that this is a problem and I don't want to be this kind of mom. So let's see, those first few, probably the first 5 years of dealing with hemophilia and my husband traveling and all of that were stressful, but again, I don't feel like it really was escalating. It was just slowly progressing, right, as it does. But I was still getting up and running 5 miles every day. I was going to the PTO. I was doing whatever for the school. It looked pretty manageable. So much so that when I met with my first sponsor and we started talking about step 1, I was pretty baffled by the unmanageability part, because I was like, it's I'm still doing everything I need to do. Now I'm taking stuff to make sure I don't vomit in the morning, or I'm hiding bottles, or I can remember going to a therapist and taking wine bottles and wrapping them in like plastic bags and throwing them into whatever Kroger parking lot trash can, and then going to the therapist and saying, yeah, I'm depressed. I don't really know why. Just why bother going and not even, but we all do it at some point. And only a couple of times, I think maybe twice, do I remember my ex-husband saying something about my drinking. He was not very confrontational. So he said something a couple of times, and that started to help, bring it to my attention. I can remember my mom saying something a couple of times, a few things here and there. What happened was, at the end, I went to AA in Grapevine. I lived in Southlake, and I went to the Grapevine AA because, God forbid, I see anybody in Southlake that I knew. Also, something ridiculous that we do. And I went to my first meeting, and I cried through the whole thing, like from the minute I sat down to the minute I got up. And this one gentleman who had been sober, probably 30 or 40 years, was so kind, and he gave me a big book. And I said, I don't have my checkbook, I can't pay you. And he said, just come back tomorrow. And I said, okay, thanks. And I didn't go back for a year. I brought it home. That moment, I just remember thinking, oh my God, how has my life gotten to this point? Okay, I need to get my act together again, right? And just try it again to do it that way. Probably after a few other kind of smaller incidents, but ones that kind of scared me, I called a friend, a very good friend of mine, girlfriend, who's not an alcoholic, and said, I need help, and I need you to come with me. And this time we went to the Southlake meeting. We went on a Friday night to a newcomer meeting. I was mortified that people were talking to me even. I remember hearing them talk about something did you see that on Facebook? And I was like, oh my God, they're friends on Facebook even. Like they know each other outside of, I thought we were here just to be miserable and commiserate on how well life is going. So it didn't take long, though, before I started to see the liveliness in the room and the laughter and the community that happened. And it started to, and I'm a little bit type A. I know that shocks you for alcoholics. So I remember thinking, okay, 12 steps, there's 12 months in a year. By the end of this year, I'll be done and moving forward, right? I'll have graduated, and I was studying the book, and I was, really trying to master it as opposed to absorb it. Or finally somebody said to me, will you stop trying to get the program? Just let the program get you. Like, just keep showing up. This is not, you can't put this into a spreadsheet and get out what you want of it. Just keep coming and let it happen. And that did happen. And I had 3 one-night relapses, which when I look back are so ridiculous. So like, what, drinking one night, what is that going to do? The first 2, I came back humiliated, embarrassed. I had to call girlfriends and say, you got to come with me because I got to get a chip. The last time, I was not embarrassed. I was not humiliated. I was terrified. I was really scared. So I could tell something was different in that. I can remember talking to my first sponsor, and we'd go through the book, and there's that one line about, we start to recoil from it as if from a flame. And I remember saying to her, I don't have that. I'm not recoiling. I know that I should, but it doesn't feel that way for me. I didn't have necessarily daily cravings because I wasn't a daily drinker, but I still wanted it, right, in my life, even though I was trying really hard to keep it out. After that 3rd one, I had it. I knew that shit burned, and it burned fast and hard, and it was not good for me, and it's not going to happen. The other thing I realized was that I had some, like a small list maybe that I didn't really realize that I had, that if maybe that happened, then I could drink. Or if this happened, maybe I could drink. Like if, one of my parents died, or if I went through a divorce. The things you hear people talking about in the room that you're like, oh my God, how did they stay sober through that? And I remember thinking, if that happened to me, that I would drink. Most of which I have been through and have not drank. But it took time for me to make that change from the intellectual part, like when I was studying the book and trying to learn it all, to it went down to my heart and my being. And that list of possibilities, maybe I would drink, it was like a little escape hatch, right? If the pressure got too hot, then I had this one little option reserved. But what I realized later that meant was that it was not entirely off the table. And I had to get it. It had to just be off the table. It was not an option under any circumstances. So I met with anybody I could meet with. I met with all the women of my group. I especially the ones who had relapses and then had some sobriety after that and wanted to learn how to do all of that. So I got a new sponsor at that point, not because my sponsor was not good or not right for me, because I just felt like I needed to bring it back down to the studs and start over again. Something was missing, obviously, in me and my perspective at that time. So met with a new sponsor, started with a new sponsor, and was really, so one of the reasons why that night was so hard for me, or that last drunk was so hard for me, was my ex-husband had taken our youngest son on a Boy Scout camping trip. He was very active in Boy Scouts, so they were gone where cell phones couldn't reach them, etc. And my middle son had a friend over, so at that time he was probably 12 maybe, and they were running around the house doing whatever. And my oldest son and a friend, so they were sophomores in high school, so I think 16, had come home. And of course they know I'm in the program, right? I've been in the program now 3 years. And my oldest son said he walked in and he knew immediately, because the other 2 kids were running around up, in chaos, and I was just, okay, whatever. And I had my niece with me. I had gone and gotten, I have a niece that lives in Mansfield, and I picked her up. We were going to make cookies. I don't get a lot of girl time because I have boys all around me. So I picked her up. We were going to make cookies and watch, I think it was Frozen or something at the time. And when we went to get the stuff at the grocery store to make cookies, I'd been sober almost a year at that point, just decided that white wine made perfect sense to go along with that. It was as if there was I had no defense. And I wasn't, I don't know exactly what was wrong with my program, but some piece was missing. It was for sure this possibility that it wasn't entirely off the table. And I still think I thought I was maybe a little in control of it, because maybe things hadn't gone so far off the rails that I had a little wiggle room maybe to work with there. All the tricks alcoholics play on themselves were not working in my favor. So I ended up drinking the wine, and my oldest son came home and could figure out what was going on. And then, of course, when you haven't drank for a year and then you drink a bottle of wine, it hits like a ton of bricks. And so it hit me all at once, and I went into the back and passed out, basically. And when I woke up in the morning, of course, right, that's the worst feeling. You wake up in the morning, you're like, oh. So I went out into the living room, and my oldest son and his best friend were sleeping on the floor next to my niece, who was 10, to take care of her. And I was like, this is not good. So I tried to rally together and take everybody to tennis or whatever the hell that had to happen that day. And I called a couple girlfriends and said, like, I can't do this again. This is not going to happen again. What do we got to do? So that's when I went and got another chip and started over. But I picked up my oldest son from school maybe 2 days later, and I took him to lunch. And I had to look him in the eye and apologize. And that was not the kind of mom that I was, and it wasn't the kind of mom that they deserved. And it was hard to explain. But I looked him in the eye and I said, I promise you, I will not put you in that position again. I'll do everything I can to not do that. And I still haven't, so I'm grateful for that. So I just, I started working on my program really hard. I made sure that, and I had been going to a lot of meetings. I made sure that I was continuing to do that. I made sure to do another 4th and 5th step. I made sure to, see if there was other amends that had to be made. And kind of just really, I got in the middle of the herd, right, as we are taught to do. I got more involved. I hadn't been doing a lot of social things with the group other than my girlfriends, so I started doing a little bit more of that. And things were starting to feel better. I was starting to relax a little bit about the program, sponsoring women. 2 weeks after that happened, though, my now ex-husband quit his job to start a business without really thinking through a lot of the ramifications of. So our middle son's health condition is probably one of the most expensive conditions in the U.S. to manage. It costs about $1 million a year for just medicine. So the need for insurance was a big stressor for me. So I went back to work immediately. No. Well, I did. I went back to work at another place, and then I went back to work full time in November of that year. And so, that started to put some strain on our marriage and stuff. But I will tell you that I stayed connected to the group. I had a routine that I really liked. I made sure I, pretty much did the 5 Alive every day. I talked to, an alcoholic friend. I went to as many meetings as I could. I read something every day, and I certainly, asked God for help in the morning when I got up and said thank you when I went to bed. And I really believe that if you do those 5 things every day, you may not get to a meeting every day, but if you do those, you stand a pretty good chance of at least making it through that day, which is all we ever try to shoot for. So things. The one other thing I can really recall that. So once you get sober, then your kids start talking to you about what they remember. And my middle one, again with the needle in the arm. I had been over at a neighbor's house one time. They drank a lot, and I was over there having wine or hanging out by the pool or whatever. And I had to come home. My husband was out of town and do his infusion, and I had been drinking. Now I thought I was not very drunk or somewhat sober, kind of generally as we think we are, but he was cautious. He was cautious with me sitting down with a needle to stick in his arm. And I missed. And I almost never missed. I missed the vein. And he said, maybe we should do this tomorrow. And I said, oh, no, it's fine. And then I did it and I hit the vein. But boy, did that kid remember that. Here's your mom, who he can tell has been drinking, not only shoving a needle in your arm and missing, but then really dismissing, how he felt about that. So I'm really glad that they were able to share those kind of things with me. My youngest son actually says, well, you're not an alcoholic, you don't drink, because he was too young to remember, really. And I said, well, I did, and I don't anymore. So it was good that, they aired how they felt, and really to my kids, it just became a living amends, right? I certainly made amends for those specific incidents, but I was determined that their amends would be that I would not do that again. I would not put them in that position, and I would not be that mom. So after that, my dad died. I got a divorce. Getting sober changed my marriage, and not so much for the better, because you change the rules of the sandbox after 18 years of everybody knowing how we operate, and all of a sudden one of us isn't operating that way anymore. It was very challenging. So we went to a lot of therapy and stuff, and eventually decided that was not working. And that was right. Well, that was in 2018, but it took a long time to get through that process. And then the shit really hit the fan. COVID happened. My youngest son, who has severe anxiety. My dad had severe anxiety, hence all the yelling. I had severe anxiety. And I didn't really know that was related to drinking. I knew it helped me relax, but I didn't, I had one psychiatrist of one of my boys say she diagnosed him with anxiety and ADD or something. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. And she said, you have it. I said, oh, good to know. I thought it was just running at a high RPM. And she was like, yeah, okay. So, and I had self-medicated in lots of ways. I ran till I had no more vertebrae in my back, basically. I ran for 35 years, 5 miles a day, all the time, which helps. But I didn't know, that I was having to do all of those things, include drink, to settle that a little bit. I knew by the time I got into AA that I was comfortable saying, and I was an alcoholic, because I could tell, again, that my relationship with alcohol was different than my relationship with everything else in my world. I could manage almost most things, but that one I couldn't manage. And what a gift it is to finally just understand that, admit that, and just put it down and let it go. Just surrender fully. What I also learned is that I didn't have very strong faith in anything. And I was taught, basically, I grew up Catholic, and we did the Catholic school thing. We didn't go to church as a family, and there was no talk of religion in our house, really. They would say, I would say, how come all my friends go to Mass on Sunday, and we do yard work? And my mom was like, because that's why we send you to Catholic school. They're supposed to cover all that. And we have 5 kids. My mom was working full time. My dad was working full time. It was more about getting stuff done. So, everything I remember experiencing and learning in the Catholic Church, certainly it was a God of with a ledger, right? A God who kept score of what you did well and what you didn't do well, and you'd have a discussion when you got there at the end and decide which way you came in a little better on one side or the other. So I knew a lot about religion, and I knew a lot about Catholicism, and I just didn't think it applied to me. Somehow I was not able to make a connection with God for me. So when I got to AA, I realized, okay, that has to change, because I've been all this time, my whole life, trying to manage everything and everybody. And I didn't really know that. Of course, when you're a mom, you get into, then it is your job. But even before, I don't think I never had a knowing or a peace that things might turn out okay. For my brain always said, you can't handle this, and it's not going to end well. And I'm thinking part of that is the way I grew up, in the household I grew up. And part of it is an anxious brain, and part of it may just be my personality. I got to where I didn't really care why. It didn't really matter why I'm an alcoholic. At some point you just go, it is what it is. But it was helpful for me to go back and start to understand some things about myself so I could choose different behavior. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, so the shit hit the fan in 2020. So I was, 4 years sober at that point. And my youngest son, when COVID happened, he had a lot of anxiety. I mean, from a little bitty boy, he spent all of kindergarten under a table. So we had to do it again. He had like a red shirt year on kindergarten. And he was, migraine headaches, just super, super anxious. I spent so much time trying to help manage his anxiety so he could function. And then my dad died, and then my ex-husband moved out, and he switched to high school and basically kind of quit his activities and things like that, and he spiraled into a depression. And then COVID hit, and he really spiraled. And I hospitalized him 3 times in 2020 for being suicidal. It was tough. And of course, it was happening during COVID. So like my mom, who lives in Addison, couldn't come over and help. I was going to work, really worried that he would hurt himself. I had to put my older 2 boys kind of in charge of him. So I didn't drink, obviously, and I really leaned into the program. I have a really good friend in the program who reminds me, same woman who, when I called her from my closet crying because I had my last drinking experience, she said, all right, well, we have 2 choices here. You sit here and cry in the closet, or you can take this moment and use it and make your program stronger. And she was very helpful. But she also says, in a storm, you just need to drop your sail. Stop fighting everything. Stop trying to manage everything. Just stop. So I realized in all of that, because I was so helpless to help this kid, so helpless, that I had to I really had to learn how to really hand things off. And I had been practicing that, writing it down, putting it in the God box, talking to God about, but man, when it's your kid's life on the line, it's pretty tough. But you get to where you have no other alternative, right? I couldn't keep him alive. So I learned a lot more about my faith and how deep it needed to be, and could be, and was really, as much as I look back at that time, which was super painful, I learned a lot more about my faith and a lot more about really leaning on God. There's also somewhere, I think I talked about this in a meeting over here one time, but there's also a place in the book, I can't remember what page it's on, where they are talking about, I started to ask, what would God have me be, not what he would have me do. And that one I prayed every morning. It's in one of my morning prayers, and I prayed that every morning because I couldn't do anything, right, to help my kid, really. But I needed to figure out what I needed to be for him and just how to show up for a kid who was struggling. So that was, very humbling. and very good lessons for me about what I can control and what I can't control, even though I sort of thought I had that kind of figured out. I got a crash course in really making sure I had that lesson down. And the good news is he's doing better today. He got a driver's license, and he's got a job, and it was good. But I if it weren't for this program, oh my God, that would have been such a nightmare those years. I can't imagine how much worse I could have made that for him. He actually had 2 or 3 phases where he thought he was trans in the middle of all this is going on, and he was asking for hormones, and I was like, oh my God. Okay. And I remember I had one of my best friends growing up was gay, and I remember thinking, okay, I have 3 boys. If anybody comes out, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to be the mom who knows. They're going to say, my mom was so awesome when I came out to her. And then, of course, this kid says, I think I'm trans. And I was like, I got nothing. I mean, I don't that was not what I was prepared to hear. So, of course, I was, oh, I love you. I said everything I would have said if he had said he was gay. But then when we got to the hormone part, and he wanted me to take him to a doctor and get him on hormones, when he was still suicidal, and I said no, he was like, well, I knew you weren't going to be supportive. And I went, well, it is what it is, but I'm not supporting that. You can work on that when you're more stable. And that seems to be resolved right now. I don't know. I think he was just trying to figure out kind of where he fit in the world a little bit, but remains to be seen. He's only 18. Doesn't matter to me one way or the other, as long as he's alive and healthy and happy. And again, I have these 3 fabulous kids, and I have a relationship of which I'm very proud of and very excited about. There was probably some times in those years when if you would have said, this is what's coming and you're going to do this without drinking, I probably would have said, I don't know if I can do that. But the power of this program is you don't have to do all that at once. I can remember those every morning during that time, which was so hard. Just thinking, okay, just today, just have to handle today. And I don't think I would have, I wouldn't have known that skill, right, if it weren't for the program. Luckily, by then I had 4 years under my belt of learning what one day at a time really meant. And there's sometimes that life will throw at you that one day at a time is like all you can do. Generally, it's all we can do with drinking, but sometimes it's all you can do with life. So this program has taught me so much more than I ever thought I was going to get out of this. I don't even know, you hear people say, well, I came to A because I wanted to just, drink more responsibly or, bring my drinking to a manageable level. I don't think I came in with that. I didn't know anything about AA other than had to do with drinking too much. But I came in again knowing that something was wrong about how I related to alcohol. And luckily the people in this program are amazing, and we share something that's can be spoken or unspoken. Everybody seems to understand it. There's always heads nodding in the room, no matter what you're going through. My relationship with my higher power is definitely probably the strongest it's ever been, and I hope to continue. I work really hard to keep that going. So, when I think about that first meeting that I went and I cried through the whole time, it would have been, it's nice to know that, it would have been awesome for me to know at that time that if you just try, if you just stick in here, things will get better. But, for anybody who's struggling or maybe doubting whether this will work for you, I promise that it will if you just stick in. You just have to keep showing up. And then there's so much good, but you just have to be willing to really surrender all of it and just do this thing one day at a time. That's the best any of us can do. So that's my story. That's all I have. Thank you.